all right, God, you gave me the opportunity to have this, beautiful life, a wife, a house, 10 kids, but you're calling me to a different relationship with you. And so I'm going to give that back to you. I'm going to discern the priesthood.
Podcast 17, we have a graduate from Walsh University, enrolled at St. Mary's Seminary, and the brother of co-host, me, Mike. Chris, it's great to have you.
Good to have you, Chris.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be here. A long drive down from the land, but we made it. We made it, gents.
We did do it, and this is nice, low-key, relaxing, trying to just jump right into it.
I mean, you say low-key, but this is quite the production. I was sitting here, okay, they do their own podcast. They have a few subscribers, but I'm impressed, boys. I really am. Really, hats off to you.
We got the TV screen back there, coffee machine to the left. Unfortunately, Brian's not here today, though.
Yeah, but he did leave a good setup for us. So
he did leave a good
shout
setup
out to Brian.
for us.
Thanks for
Yes.
setting everything up. I mean, it was a flawless transition. I came here, we chatted for a little bit, and then now we're recording.
Only took us an hour to set up. That was...
No, it was not an hour.
It is now.
It was not an hour.
Yeah, guys, we talked about starting the podcast at 10. It's only 11, so we're doing really well. And so, Chris, we mentioned that you're enrolled in St. Mary's Seminary. And how's the time in the seminary been so far?
It's been beautiful. It really has been a lot of peace. We're very blessed in the Diocese of Cleveland to have our own seminary, and it's beautiful. Like there's it's just a holy place. It really is. You can go. I mean, when you go there, you can just feel like you can feel God's presence. You can see it in the other seminarians. You can see it in the formators. You can just feel the true presence of God there. It really has been a blessing in my life to be there.
How long have you been there?
Just a few months. It's kind of crazy. I imagine it's a similar feeling, when a priest gets ordained and he's a new priest and he's at his parish, like, oh, this is a little scary. And then, when you first become a seminarian, you get people go, oh my goodness, you're so holy. It's like, I'm still learning how to pray. I've only been here for a few months. I know just as much as you do right now. I have a lot of formation to go, but it's been, just a few short months, but gee, it's been really just transformative. Really has been.
At the end of the last podcast, which you definitely have watched, we talked about vocations a little bit and finding your vocations and how, like, we're talking with our guest Nora, talking about like a girls group and how it's helping girls find their vocation, what true vocation is. How did that process look like for you?
It was a pretty painstaking process. It really was. So it's not, especially I'm still in the process of discerning my vocation. Doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to be a priest. It's set in stone, or I'm going to do this religious order, or this is what I'm doing. It's an ongoing process, so it's not like I'm at the end of the road. It's not like I'm getting married tomorrow or I'm getting ordained tomorrow. It's still a long process, but for me especially, it really was just a painstaking process, and not really for me, more or less for our Lord. Praise the Lord for all the patience He's had with me, because He's had a lot of patience with me. But my personal journey, it kind of reflects the life of my patron saint, my Saint Juan Diego. And so, for those unfamiliar, Juan Diego, he met Our Lady of Guadalupe, and she asked him to do some things. He's like, wait, like there's other things you need to do first, and kind of pushed it off and said that. And that's a similar thing it was for me. At the young age, I had the opportunity to altar serve and be very involved in my parish, and that really did spark an interest for the priesthood. And so you have that like internal fire, like, wow, like that priesthood is beautiful, and I want that. And so you pursue that, and you're like, oh, this is great, and the more you pray, this is fantastic. But then you grow up and you're like, it's not really that cool. It's like you grow up, you start doing sports, you're like, dang, like I was in high school, I won my conference, and girls are talking to you, you're like, this is it, man. Like, this is awesome. Like, I'm a cool kid. Everyone comes like, oh my goodness, Christopher, like, how are you? Like, talk to me. Like, all this attention. You see, these monetary things, which are awesome. These fast cars, beautiful houses. Like, who doesn't want that? That's great. And so, you have this internal like tugging of your heart, like, follow me, be my priest. But then you have this like external like, look at this, I can go out every night, I can hang out, or you turn 21, you're going out to the bars, and it's a lot of fun out there, hanging out with the boys, playing Fortnite every night. It's a great time, and so you have all these things, but for me, it was like I always had this little call, this little tugging at the heart, like, hey, Christopher, come follow me, and it's like, okay, Lord, I want to, but like I don't want to give up these other things I have, and so I go to college, I graduate college, I start graduate school, and everything's going, it's fantastic for me. And it's kind of the story of my life. Everything goes really well. The Lord's blessed me with a lot of things, and I'm enjoying them. And then the closer I get to everything I set out to do, it's like, why are you still tugging at me, Lord? Can you just give me a break or give me some room? And you push God away. It's like, okay, I understand you want this, God, but I want a beautiful wife. I want 10 kids. I want the whole nine. And God's like, Christopher, like, you want me and I want you. And so you finally, okay, it's like a bright light. You're like, I gotta look at it. And you start looking at it and you start really praying about it. And then like everything starts coming together and it's like, all right, God, you gave me the opportunity to have this, beautiful life, a wife, a house, 10 kids, but you're calling me to a different relationship with you. And so I'm going to give that back to you. And I'm going to discern the priesthood. And so that's what it really has been for me. Everything works out great, but there's just a deeper call.
There's a couple things that you mentioned before. You were talking about discernment and formation. And those are like two very key ideas inside the seminary, but they're very distinct, right? The idea of like you go into the seminary to discern, but by discerning, you are actively your heart is being formed into something else, right? Can you speak on, like what is your discernment process personally look like? Is it sort of like you feel that tug on your heart a little bit, right, inside? And do you think that is what is actively forming you, or is there something else that's kind of helping form you into what you want your discernment to be, like what you want your vocation to be?
So it looks, like you said, it's very individualized and looks different for different people, and especially different stages of the seminary you're in. So for me, I'm a first pre-theologian. There's a lot more focus on my discernment versus if I was a fourth year theologian. Discernment is not as much a priority as formation is. Formation's both, like, they're both equal. You need them both. Like, you don't just, this is not like a job. You don't just go, or like, college, just go there, you study, you graduate, they slap a collar and you send you, like, no, your heart needs to be changed. Like, you need to be a changed man. And so for me personally, it's not like I'm sitting there every night like, is this what I should be doing? Like, it's like, no, like, before you enter the seminary, you work with, through spiritual direction, through the vocation director, and you commit to 1 year. And so, God, like, this year is your year. And we'll not going to focus on, okay, am I staying or am I leaving? Like, right now, like, my discernment is, God, I've given you this year. And this year's been, God's given me so much. And then we're getting to the point where we're having, like, at the seminary, we're having evaluations starting to happen, and you're constantly being evaluated by your, by your peers and by your formators. And so then, through spiritual direction, through prayer, I'm always asking the question, is this something I can see myself doing for the rest of my life? Is this something that's not for me, but truly God's calling me to do? And that's a big piece. But the main thing with discernment is, like, I'm not asking the question, should I come back next year yet? I'm focusing on getting formed and focusing on that. But there'll be a time, next semester, okay, the year's wrapping up. How did things go? And God, are you still calling me to be here again?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Because, like, growing up with Catholics, like, we've all grown up with a lot of Catholic families around us. And we all know those kids that, since they're like little, they're like, I'm going to be a priest. I'm going to be a sister. And can be looked at as like, this is my will over God's will. Or those people, it's like, I'm going to be married. And they don't fully look at what God might have to offer them, what his path might actually be. And that's awesome that you're taking it and you're just like, let God's will be done. Surrendering yourself, dying to yourself to God's will. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting because, ultimately you're going to come up to some sort of decision. And the way that you kind of happen upon that decision is more complicated than a lot of people realize, I think, oftentimes, because a lot of people will just think, like, this is what I'm more personally acclimated towards. These are the kind of things that I like. I like the spiritual attributes of being a father more than the physical attributes, right? So you might think that I'm, being called to be a priest. But God doesn't necessarily always call you to the things that you want to do or the things that you're just naturally acclimated to. At the end of it all, I don't know if it becomes painstakingly clear for most people, but you are just called to make a decision, really, at some point. You're discerning inside the seminary. When do you make that choice of, like, I'm going to stay? Because sometimes there's a leap of faith that has to happen, right? Not every single person, I think, who became a priest immediately knew, like, I'm going to be a priest. Can you speak on something like that?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
There is a point. You're right on. There is a point where it's okay. Like, you're fully committing yourself, and it's kind of, you don't really think about it, but it really doesn't happen until a lot later in the seminary. Like every seminarian there, you know, the further you get along, the more you're invested into it, and it's a lot more serious the further you are. But you don't. I mean, it's like weird to say, but you really don't commit yourself until you take your first vows as a transitional deacon. And so every year you're kind of saying, hey, this year's for you, Lord. Or, you know, when you become an acolyte, like, hey, this is a ministry you're giving me, Lord, and I'm going to give it back to you and serve you. But you're not laying your life down truly until you take your vows. And so for us, it's a little bit different. I know, like, religious orders, it's the same thing, but they'll take, like, a 3-year vow. So, like, to become a lay brother for the Capuchins, when they get there, they'll do their novitiate, kind of test out a year. And then after that, if they want to stay, they'll take, simple vows, which need to be renewed after 3 years. They'll do those once or twice, and then after that, they'll take the permanent vows.
There's a story that I really, really like. I kind of hope that it's true, but it's sort of about discernment. Actually, no, it's more about formation of like how God kind of draws us to our ultimate vocation. And it goes to the Soviet Union or Soviet. And they had basically sent these people to infiltrate like the Orthodox seminaries to try to basically just corrupt the church as much as they possibly could. And this is a historical fact. This actually was happening. Whether or not this one unique story actually happened, I don't know. But so this one guy specifically went into the seminary, and he would go to confession weekly with the same priest. And every single time that he went into confession, he would tell the priest, Father, I'm here to infiltrate the church. I'm not here to actually become a church or a priest. I just want to destroy the church. And knowing that the priest couldn't tell anyone that this guy was sinning, right? A priest cannot tell his superiors or anyone about the sins that are confessed to him. And it goes by week and week, year after year. The guy is still saying the same thing. He's confessing the same thing. Father, I'm here to infiltrate and destroy the church. I'm not here to become a priest. And now he's become a deacon. Same thing. For the next year, he says the exact same sin, confesses it every single week. And then ultimately he's about to become a priest. And the bishop announces to the crowd, before you become a priest, he says, does anyone in the audience have a reason why this man should not become a priest? And of course, there is one person who knows why he shouldn't become a priest, but he doesn't say anything. And this guy, this Soviet spy, was waiting for him to say it. The entire time, for 7 years, he was waiting for this priest to say something, and he never did. And he was just about to become a priest, and when the bishop said that, and the priest didn't say anything, his heart was immediately converted. He was like, how on earth can this guy not betray me? I'm literally trying to destroy his faith. And he stands there like it's nothing. And his heart just became converted, just like that on the spot. And I think that's how formation is. It's like, he went in there with like his own, goal. Like he wanted to destroy the church. But in the end, he ended up being converted out of his own will. He had no choice. He was just instantly converted, and he ended up becoming an Orthodox priest.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Like, you give God a millimeter. This guy's a spy. This guy has ill intentions, right? A millimeter, but, I mean, God can use anyone. God calls anyone. And that's a big reason why it's so hard to, like, discern this call sometimes. You're like, priests are holy men, and, like, God, you and me both know what I've done, and you and me both know who I am. Like, this can't be me, but we have to remember it's not your priesthood, it's not my priesthood, it's God's priesthood, and he intentionally calls people, and he can do anything with anyone. He really can. It's crazy.
Yeah, God can do all and will do all. And I want to take a step back a little bit and talk about how someone may enter the seminary. I know yours is a little bit different because you already finished 4 years of college, but for someone who's discerning throughout high school and graduates and has that call, they feel that they have that call and want to discern it further in the seminary, how would that look for them? So let's just use the Diocese of Cleveland.
Yeah, so it's going to be different. Just reach out to the vocations director. So we have a minor seminary, which is a college seminary. You apply to college, you apply to the seminary, you go through your college, you study philosophy or whatever they want to study, and then you enter major seminary and study major theology and stuff like that. So it's really, you just got to talk to your vocations director. I mean, if you have the thought, it's a very, the devil hates his seminarians, so he's always trying to attack you. And so I encourage anyone, if you feel like the tiniest call, just talk to the vocations director. It's not like we make the mistake sometimes that we talk to him way too late. It's like, okay, I'm only going to call this guy if I know for sure I want to go into the seminary. It's like, no, just, hey, thinking about this, Father, what does this mean? He's there to help, find priests and that, but he's also there to help you discern your call, and he only wants you there if he believes that God is calling you. So if you you can't do this by yourself, especially, like I said, the devil's going to attack you as soon as you have these thoughts. And like, oh, you're not holy enough, like you're a horrible person, or attack you with different sins or, different temptations. He's coming after you. And so just go to the vocations director, go to a holy priest, or go to your pastor, say, hey, am I crazy? What's going on here? Like, it is a crazy thing. It's countercultural. Go, you need help, though. You can't do this by yourself. So go to your pastor, go to the vocations director. They're not going to, I tell my pastor, I'm thinking about this, and you turn the corner next thing you know, you have a collar on, you're a priest. That doesn't happen. And that's what we think. It's like, it's not that. It's like, hey, it's a good thought to have. It's fantastic. Like, hey, what's going on, man? And they'll guide you through it. Like, you can't do this by yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think something that really does help with discernment is actually putting yourself in the process of what that thing looks like, right? Like, I don't think you can really discern that you're going to be married if you're not dating anyone or if you've never dated anyone, right? Like, you can't just say that that's what you're called to do. Some people can, but not everyone. Most people.
Yes, you have to give it a try. So it's
I think it's the same thing with priesthood. I mean, like, you can't say like, I'm going to become a priest and then not go to the seminary, or I don't know if I'm going to become a priest and then you don't go to the seminary, and then all of a sudden you're 30 years old and you have no idea what you're supposed to do.
But people still do enter at 30, and sometimes God has other things he needs to show you first before you go into the seminary. So those that enter at a later age, that's beautiful. And some of those priests end up being the best priests, because they've had so much life experience, they can really relate. But it's funny, we do often compare, like our relationship with the church into like, dating or like relationships with other people. So it's like, it's very clear for most seminarians, and like pre-theology is kind of weird. So like when you're in college seminary, it's more like this, you're kind of dating the church. You're in that spot, there's no serious commitments just yet. A lot of people discern in and out of college. You're a young kid. You're 18 years old. It's hard to say, I know this is exactly what I'm going to do. So a lot of people come in and out, and it's great formation what they receive. But like, it's pretty clear you're dating the church, and then you go on to major theology, and first theology, you become a candidate, and so the bishop recognizes that you're now in like formal formation to become a priest, and it's very serious. That's when you get your collar, and you're technically engaged to the church. But pre-theology is a little different because you don't go into minor seminary, you go into major seminary, but you're not a candidate just yet for the first 2 years. And so, like, we always say, like, me and the church right now are in this weird, like, what are we phase? Like, hey, hey, you know what? I love you and you love me, but, we're not, I'm not ready for candidacy yet. I still have some things I have to prove to the church and some formation to undergo, but it's not like it's more serious than just dating the church.
Right.
Because,
the church
I'm an older
is your
guy,
spouse,
so
and you have to prove your commitment before you, actually get
so
the spouse.
It's just the church and I are like this weird, like, what are we? Like, what's going on, man? Like, hey, what are we doing? What are we doing? But it's a lot of fun.
No, it's been really cool to like kind of watch you enter into seminary. And I remember when I think mom or dad or someone told, I don't know if you were the first one to tell me that you were going to go into seminary, but I remember you were going through some things and like you decided you were going to stop your graduate program, and the whole family thought you were about to go move to Illinois and start working with the Lemkes, and we're all prepared to be like, what are you doing? You're giving up so much. You worked so hard at school. And then you're like, I'm going to join the seminary. We're all like, wow.
Yeah, it's
okay. Yeah.
It is funny. So especially pre-theologians, if you ever want to hear a good story, ask a pre-theologian like how it came to, because it's like the weirdest thing. It's like, what, you're in the middle of that? And like, some guys are out there like, hey, yeah, I was making like $500,000 a year traveling all over the world. I was like, yeah, it's not for me. I'm gonna go become a priest. It's like, it's the funniest thing. It's like, what? Like, you turn that away? It's like, it's crazy. There's these hilarious stories. Like, yeah, I was in the middle of this, and it's like, oh, time for the priesthood.
There was some actor like that. I can't remember his name, but he was a relatively well-known actor that was in a lot of TV shows, and he was destined to go to higher things. Like, he probably could have become like a B-list celebrity and be like in movies and stuff like that. And he just decided to just quit one day, and he became a priest. He entered the seminary and decided, like, this is what I want to do. He gave up all the riches and all the fame. This guy, he's set to make millions, if not, hundreds of millions.
There's so many cool stories like that. There was these, I forget where they were. There was these handful of supermodels that just one day stopped and they became cloistered nuns. Like, just top of the world here. Jesus calls, God calls, and you're like,
gotta answer, man.
Let's go.
That's the one phone call you can't turn away.
Yeah, that's that leap that you mentioned. It's that leap of faith, and it's beautiful.
One thing I wanted to talk about was the world, I think, has really struggled in terms of identity, right? In terms of what feminine identity is and what masculine identity is. And in our podcast last week, we were talking about feminine identity because we were talking to my sister who runs an all-girls group with a focus on, like what Catholic women are supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. What inside the seminary, because the seminary is males only, right? You can't have girls becoming priests. What kind of masculine values? Like, is there a masculine identity that you think is very present there? And I'm not talking masculine in like the modern sense of the term.
Mm-hmm.
I mean modern, like masculine as in like, like a father type figure. Like, do you think that they actively try to instill those types of values at the seminary?
Oh,
of,
absolutely.
Like being a spiritual father. And what does that look like?
Yeah, so spiritual fatherhood it's so beautiful. I mean, the best way to understand it is like when you look at your priest, like my spiritual director, and shout out Father Blonde. I love that guy to death. But I feel like a 3-year-old sometimes. Your dad's out to work and you're sitting there at the end of the day, like, when am I going to see my dad? When am I going to see my dad? Whenever Father Blind walks in, I'm like, Father Blind. I'm like, Father Blind. But the reason why it's spiritual fatherhood is because he loves you like a father. He provides for you.
Mm-hmm.
He's there for you. He's the rock you fall on. Like, hey, I don't know what's going on. Something's happening. The priest is there to guide you. To point out this is Christ. This is what you have to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
He's that leader. It's that it's that masculine aspect. Buck stops with me. Something goes wrong, you come to me and we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're doing something wrong, you're disciplined. It's not like a priest is like actually physically disciplining you, but
he's not coming over to you with a wooden spoon.
He's not coming over to you. And, no, he's helping you out with through penance, the reconciliation, and being a guide for that. But when you have spiritual direction, sometimes you got to be a little.
Mm-hmm.
You need someone to say, hey, no, man, you can't do that. You cannot do that, and you have to have that authority figure to tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
It's love, but it's the truest sense of love, and that love is willing to go to the other.
And when I think about that, I think of Father Bill, God rest his soul.
Mm.
He helped me through so much because when I was a paramedic firefighter, going through a lot of mental battles, physical battles, spiritual battles, it was rough for me, and I've never felt more loved by a human being than when I met him. He cared so much about me. Whenever he saw me, he lit up. He asked how I was. He truly cared about me, and he
provided.
He did it in a way that I never have felt before. Like it was like, obviously I'm a really loving parent, an amazing parent, but it was different.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful.
So, Monsignor Bill.
Thank you.
Yes.
He would never let you call him that, but I'll give him the title, Monsignor Bill. Truly embodied what a priest is supposed to be. Priest, prophet, and pilgrim. And, so a priest in the sense where he's saying the masses and doing the liturgies. Prophet in the sense is like, hey, God's here, and this is what God's doing for you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Then pilgrim, going out and evangelizing and help others. But like that story of your life, it's like, hey, Father Bill showed me God where I needed the most. I'm struggling and finding my identity and finding what I'm doing in pilgrim and finding what I'm doing as a paramedic. And it's like, I don't know what's going on. And you have a kind soul like Monsignor Bill, and like, hey, God's working in you right now, and this is where he is. And he was a beautiful man, and the love he had for the Lord was palpable. And that's what made him a good priest. It was that.
And it was crazy
you
how we
even see it through him.
Yeah, and
No,
how
you
we
just
even
absolutely see it through
found him. Like, so we moved from Illinois to Ohio, and
You guys say that on the podcast all the time. It's like there should be a drinking game where it's.
You should. We'll start it with shots of tea. We don't promote drinking here.
Or coffee.
Yeah, family friendly. And he was the priest, spiritual director for, I believe it was New York Fire Department people. So he's dealt with all of those guys, and we were able to share stories. And he was able to actually relate with me, and it was just, how do we find this guy? And so we didn't go to that church. He just happened to be right down the road. We started going there. It's fantastic. We've been blessed with a lot of really amazing priests.
It's crazy. It's crazy that. So we often think God's only here for these big things. Like God's not concerned with like the little things. But it's so. I mean, that story in particular, putting a priest that can understand your background. Like God specifically put Father Bill there for you. There could have been he probably never used that, or there could be a good chance that he never will use that information again. But God cares so much specifically for you that he's putting people in your life like that. Yeah. And so it really takes, like, you need to acknowledge those things. It's like God is doing this specific thing for me. And even for like something you're only struggling with for a few months. Like God did that for you. I often so at the Seminary, we're huge into sports and we're very competitive at basketball. There's like a Northeast Ohio, not even Northeast Ohio, like Northeast seminaries that come down to the Josephinum in Columbus, and there's this huge tournament, and Borromeo Seminary won last year. But I always so when I studied exercise science, and people people pray before they go up to bat in the MLB. It's like God doesn't care if you're hitting a single, and I'm like, God is just as invested, if not more invested in that game than you are. It's like God loves you that much that he's concerned with every little thing you do. Now, he's going to have a different outcome that's going to be best for you. So it's like, if both God's really invested in me, why am I hitting a home run? Because God knows, okay, you hitting a home run every day isn't going to bring you salvation. He's using things different ways. But, when I'm sitting there and I'm playing Fortnite at night, God is just invested as me to get that dub as I am. I'm not going to get the dub every time because that's not good for me. It's not good for my pride. But God, when I'm sitting there, 1v1 situation, the team's on my back. God's right there with me, like, oh no, and then we lose. But yeah, he's still with me and he's invested.
We mentioned last week, we talked about how one of the really, really important things about guys is that we look for a community, like desperately. We are really big into the idea of camaraderie. Camaraderie is like one of the core things. Like if you're a man, it's really hard to be a lone man, right? But when you're with your guys, like it just elevates you that much higher because there's I wouldn't say the word is competition, but it's an awareness of trying to rise with people around you. And I think especially being inside of a seminary, one of the really important things that you guys, one of the most important aspects that you guys have there is that you're there with other men, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that all of you are being formed together, right? Like someone rises and everyone else does as well. Through conversation, through prayer. Is that something that you think that you've seen possibly at the seminary? Is that something that is where, or am I just crazy?
No, you're right on. So that diocesan priest it's a priestly fraternity. Mm-hmm. I mean, that starts in the seminary. Like if you go there, you'll notice like, why does everyone call each other brother? Like they're not, like we don't take, that's not a title that we like officially hold by the church, but you go there, you go to a seminary, at least, St. Mary's Seminary, we're all like, what's going on, brother? Because it really is that immediate brotherly love for each other and that fraternity. I mean, we're sitting there, I was studying the other week and it was a crazy Browns game. And like my room's across from the lounge, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm like trying to study. I got like little like lo-fi beats going on. Like I just hear scream. I'm like, what the heck's going on? So like I walk out in the hallway to look, and like the guys are throwing the football. Like we did it. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like it really is like you're called to be a priestly fraternity because you need that brotherly love to get through. But it's oh my gosh, it is such a great place. Like mm-hmm. There's like this crazy idea, like no one really knows what goes on in the seminary, and everyone has this idea. Like I remember seeing like this funny meme, we're talking about it. It's like this typical like, okay, girly challenge for seminary life, 5:15 arise, 5:30 morning meditation, and then breakfast, morning prayer and study the readings, mass, and then after that go and review the catechism. It's like that's not how seminary life looks. It's if I got it at 5:15, that'd be great, but I don't. It's more like for me. It's like, hey, 6:45, scramble so you can get to morning prayer on time. You get there, morning prayer, morning meditation, and pray, and then you eat, you go to class, you go to mass, you go to the gym, and it's just. I mean, we're guys. Like it's kind of like college, but there's a formation piece. Like we have scheduled liturgies and stuff like that, and. I have my holy hour blocked out. I have my spiritual direction, my formation advising, all that stuff. But it's not like this uber proper thing. It's, we're just dudes, man. We're just dudes that want to be priests. Mm-hmm. And so we're discerning God's call, and God willing, we'll all get there someday. But yeah, you got to go to the seminary to see it because it really is like, it's this idea. It's like, oh, you wake up and you arise and you enter into the room and you sit there and it's like, no, like you wake up, you're like, I got a paper to write. And then you go and, okay, I need to pray, talk to God, give it all to God, and then go on with my day. It's not as like this crazy, like, oh, like these are holy men, and it's like these are men striving for holiness, mm-hmm. And before they're ordained, God willing, they'll be there. They'll be changed men and be ready to be out there in the priest. But it's not like you go there and like, oh, they're all in their tuxedos and their freshly pressed cassocks and they're looking great. It's like, no, they're just dudes, man. It's you sit there and I'm praying, all of a sudden I look in the back and I see my brother seminarians like coming in, and the dean of men sitting there like, this guy's late again. It's a long going process, and there's a lot of feedback, and at the end, there's a reason why it takes 9 years or 6 years to become a priest, because by the end of it, there's your real purification. I can't be strolling in 5 minutes late to mass if you're saying mass, and so there's a big change. And it's funny, I'm one of the, like, again, I'm just a first year guy, and a lot of my friends, like my closer friends, are second year guys too. So the deacons are all there and they're ready to go. Like they're firing all cylinders, and then you have us first year guys like, whew, this has been a long week. Or we're sitting there. Another funny, great story is we're sitting there and we're starting off, and it's all, so the first pre-theologians, a lot of us, is our first time studying philosophy. And we're like, guys, this is kind of easy. This is fantastic. Like, the semester's been great. We're learning a lot, and I'm really enjoying myself. And, a week comes along, and one of my brothers goes, we have 25 pages of writing to do. And we're like, what have we done? What have we done? Talking to my FA, I was like, hey, things might not be good next week. He's like, you'll be fine, and keep your holy hour. And it's amazing when you keep your holy, like, God provided, I got through it, and I should have, I hope my professors don't watch this. I spent a lot of time on these papers, I really did.
But hope they watch them interviews.
But we're getting them on next.
It's not, to clarify, it's not like nothing was done. There was stuff done, but it's just like, God, it really is a holy place. I mean, there's so much that goes on, and because retired priests will kind of swing through all the time, and it's a funny story. So, I was talking with someone that was, obviously a priest, is in the seminary. It's like, yeah, I remember sitting in class one day, and good old Monsignor walks in, and he goes, "Gentlemen, I saw a bird with a cigarette butt in his mouth, and this is God's sign that I can smoke cigarettes today." So you tell the rector when he sees me smoking cigarettes, it was a sign from God. And we're like, oh my goodness. Like, the out-of-pocket things you'll hear there sometimes, it's just, you just gotta laugh at it, and it's, oh my goodness.
Like you said, they're all just normal people. Yeah. They're all just normal people, right?
If you've ever had the privilege to go out to, like, a dinner with a priest, or have a priest over and just hang out with them and realize, like, they're people, they're normal guys, it's fantastic. Yeah. Shout out Father Stephen, man. Father Belichick, love them all.
I mean, priests are ontologically changed, and they're set apart, but there is a human aspect to it. And yeah, if you ever want to have a good time, go talk to a retired priest, and you'll just hear some, like, some of the crazy stories of what happened in their priesthood, or even talk to a new ordained priest. I remember, Father was talking. I was like, hey man, how was your first week? And he goes, so the pastor got sick, and so I had all the weekend masses. And he goes, mind you, never been to this church for weekend mass before. And so, the mass is pretty universal, but there are particulars. And so, like, I walk in, and I look, and there's 3 chairs. And typically the presider chair is the bigger chair, and you know which one it is. He goes, they're all the same. He's like, so I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't know what chair to sit in. He's like, we're sitting in this chair, and this is if it doesn't matter, this is the new presider chair. It's hilarious. They're just like, yeah, I'll get there. And the baptism, he's like, okay, I got to find the baptismal font. Yeah, it's just the funny human aspect of it. It's like, okay, it's great, but yeah.
If you do it with confidence, no one will know that you mess up.
Yeah, just gotta.
It's like, oh, this priest does stuff differently. No, I just messed up.
Yeah, you just invoke the Holy Spirit and help out. I mean, there's so many just funny different stories you can go on at, like, with altar serving and stuff like that, where you walk out, you're like, oh my goodness. So we were serving benediction once, and we go, and it's going great, and for benediction they put the humeral veil before they grab the monstrance, and I remember Mike goes and he grabs the humeral veil, and I just hear a whunk. I'm like, what the heck was that? And you turn around, and I look, and it's the cover for a cassock, like so these things are giant. Humeral veil is like, just enough to hold it here, but this thing is so long, and so, like, the deacon gets it, and he's like trying to, and there's just nothing going on, and you're like, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? And it's just so funny.
I totally blocked that out. It's like they cover the where do they put the dead people? That was what it was.
Casket?
Yeah, the casket cover. Yeah, that was rough. Or when you broke the bells in daily mass, and I got blamed for it. And,
that happened to me in high mass.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, high mass. I was serving a high mass. Is like, I think I was 11 years old, and I was ringing, and I heard it when the priest first does this, right, above the host and the chalice. I rang it, and I could hear something was kind of like
Oh,
clanky,
no.
and I was like, that's kind of bizarre. I don't know what that is. And then he lifts up the host during the consecration, and I start ringing, and all of a sudden, every single bell just goes loose. And it was the loudest thing. We're on a marble altar, and it just rings through the church. And I look over at my brother, who I was serving with, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. I was so scared. And the priest like looked down at me, and he was like, he just nodded, and he was like, it's okay. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I remember. So this happened to me recently, and so it was a Latin mass, and I was like, I'm gonna serve this Latin mass. It's a great opportunity for some union, and the Latin mass is a beautiful mass. And I was like, okay, I'll serve the mass. It can't, I'll just follow along with the altar servers. There's a lot
It's
of
tough.
Yeah, I've gone to plenty of Latin masses. I was like, I know what the lady does. I don't know what the servers do. So I was like, I go up to one of the servers and say, hey, just let me sit in choir with you guys, and I can follow along. I don't know Latin, but I can read Latin just fine. So they got the prayer cards. That'll be just fine. And so I'm sitting there. It's like 3 minutes before mass. We're about to go out there, and the MC of the mass comes up and he goes, hey, just so you know, since you're a seminarian, you won't be sitting with us. You'll be sitting over here in the special seminarian spot. And I'm like, I am not ready for this. Because if you're sitting next to someone, you can move a little bit slower. Like, okay, you're gonna sit right over there in the chair, and so I'm set apart. Everyone's kind of tucked out in the back. They put the seminarian right in the front and
then
the side.
they push you to do incense or something like that.
Bless the Lord, I did not have to do that. But I'm sitting there, and so I'm doing my little break, doing the bows and saying the prayers, and I'm looking over at the MC, I was like, when it's time for me to go up, move, you got to give me a signal, man.
Yeah.
And so the entire time, I get a random look. I'm like, we didn't go over this. What's the signal? What? And so I'm sitting there, and he's doing one of these. I'm like, so I take a seat. He's like, I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so I finally get down, and we kneel to the kneel. I'm in the right spot, and at least I think I'm in the right spot. I'm sure there's someone that's like, that dang seminarian has no clue what's going on. I don't. You're right. I do not know what's going on up there. So I get there, and they're all saying the prayer. I'm like, I needed a prayer card for this, man. I don't know. I don't have these prayers, but I can read them. If you give me Latin, I can read Latin. I don't understand what I'm saying, but I can read it. And I was like, these guys did me dirty. I'm sitting up there in my cassock, bowing, looking at, I'm sitting there, I'm bowing, but bowing with one eye open so I can see when they're going up. And yeah, you get done. It's funny.
Yeah, I think we can honestly have a whole podcast on just talking about
the
altar
serving
stories, man. They're fantastic.
I think we need to do that in the future.
I definitely do, because we definitely hit our 30-minute mark, and this has been
a little bit over.
Yeah, this has been fantastic, Chris. Really appreciate you taking the time out and coming on. And Father Blind, if you watch this whole podcast, we appreciate everything you're doing for the seminarians and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been podcast 17.
Yeah.